Genesis X concept. Hope you guys enjoyed that. It's in the box right there. Thank you all for joining us this evening here at the Genesis studio in Munich. This is a celebration of Genesis' entry into the European market and, of course, the opening of this new retail space. This is one of 3 retail spaces. There's one in London, one in Zurich, Switzerland, and now in Munich, Germany. So there's a lot going on here, obviously, in terms of Genesis' entry into the European market. And as you're likely aware, Genesis is poised to make some significant inroads in this market, as well as worldwide. Europe is just the latest. But the company and brand are distinct, as is the design of its vehicles and its customer experience. And one of the people helping to craft these luxury experiences is Luc Donckerwolke, who is Chief Creative Officer. And also, I have the distinct pleasure, therefore, to welcome him this evening. So Luc is also recently took on the role of Chief Brand Officer for the Genesis brand, so we'll be discussing a little bit of that in the future. But first, we're going to start the evening really with a conversation about brand design and what makes the Genesis brand unique. And afterwards, we want to open it all to questions from all of you. So don't be shy, please jot down a little note, make a mental note of it, and feel free to ask. So without further ado, let's dive into this. So, Luc, you've worked for a number of luxury automotive brands before joining Genesis. Now, really what I want to talk about is the genesis of Genesis. How did that start? And how is this experience in crafting Korean luxury different from your former experiences?
This is not scripted, so please.
It's scripted for me.
So it's all improvised, so there are no nets if I say the wrong thing. I think it's a good question because I joined the Hyundai Motor Group 5.5 years ago. At that time, I signed for Hyundai. And then as I was in my non-compete period at home, I got a call from Korea saying, we're going to make a luxury brand. It's going to be called Genesis. Would you take care of it as well? And obviously, you don't say no. It was a great experience. I didn't know what I was expecting. But from the very beginning, so it started January 2016 at the Detroit Motor Show. And then the main task was how to create something different. There are good designs everywhere. There are good cars everywhere. The world does not need another premium luxury brand. So how do we do something which has a reason to be there? So you were talking about Korean luxury, and the main thing that differentiates ourselves is what I discovered when I was in Korea is service is so well integrated in the culture in Korea. There is no such thing as a bad service. It doesn't happen. It doesn't exist. And which makes it perfect. It's the perfect environment to create a luxury brand because a luxury brand, apart from perfect execution, perfect refinement, it's all about perfect service. So when and also it's about the rewarding experience. Obviously, if we talk about Lamborghini and other toys I had the chance to play with before, it's luxury, but it's a challenging luxury. It's the product, the brand that always wants to measure to you to see if you're good enough for the product. We are a complete different experience. It's all about rewarding you. It's about in all the senses. So it's not about designing a great product because, again, there are talented designers all over the place. It's about creating a product and the experiences that go with the product, that support this product. And that is what I discovered, a culture of refinement, and we'll go deeper in that, a culture of exquisite sense of aesthetics. You never see a Korean badly dressed. It doesn't exist. My designers are incredibly talented at creating, orchestrating great sculptures and forms. So it's all about coaching them for the right products. So, and this is why, this is how it all started. So it was creating something unique with the DNA, the design DNA. We will go deeper in that, but also making sure that we transport the best of the Korean culture into our products and the brand.
But that leads me into this recent addition, which is the role of Chief Brand Officer on top of the role of Chief Creative Officer. So tell me a little bit about the significance of that to you and why that's important.
It's a bit of those letters are always started as a CDO, then became CCO, and now CBO. Actually, it all makes sense because when you create a luxury brand, there's no such thing as a product that you design as a stylist and you just invent something because it's cool, because it's great, because it's new. It has to be in line with the brand. And this is why we decided that design is brand, brand is design. And this is, you will see as well, the face of our cars is not just something that we designed just because it was fashionable, because we had a great idea. It's simply the morphing of the logo on the car. It's the crest grille is coming from the crest of the logo, as you've seen in the film of the JX, and the quad lights, the two that originated two-line symbol that we have is actually simply the feathers of the wings. So it's pure brand, nothing else. This is why we said let's make sure that it's all in the same hands, and the design is serving the brand and the brand is supporting the design. So we have a holistic approach. Nothing gets out of line. It's not about creating stylistic masterpiece that will be fashionable and then will be after old. We really want to make sure that everything we do is in the brand.
But specifically then, there are certain attributes that make up a Genesis product. So talk to me a little bit about the USP of the Genesis brand.
So,
from a design perspective,
should we start maybe with the film of the GV80, maybe just as a
That's a good one to watch. So let's watch the GV80 film first, if we could, please.
This film was filmed like this photo as well in our design studio in close to Seoul. It's the best design studio I've ever worked for after 30 years of career. It's about 40,000 square meters, and it's just a perfect stage to design the right products. But as you see, it's about an exercise in reduction, in orchestrating the right elements, not too many, just a few ones, and it's about also transporting this sense of aesthetic, as I mentioned before. We are a non-aggressive country in Korea. We are a non-arrogant country, different than other Asian cultures, and this had to be seen in the cars. The cars are not aggressive. They have a certain status, but they will never be aggressive because they reflect the culture. You saw some images of pottery. You saw some, and there is a huge amount of craftsmanship, and there's a high sense of what we call the beauty of the white space in Korea. Korean art is much different than all Asian arts. You have a design element in art which is not fighting with other design elements. It's basically normal. This is what we say. There's a design element on a white page, and other countries will fill all the other cultures will fill all the white pieces of the support you're working on with a lot of design elements. They will be all fighting it again. And this is what we actually brought into the design of our cars. So we have decided, as we are non-aggressive, we don't do wedge design. Wedge design is, it's a boy racer kind of thing. We are more like a riverboat on a lake. It's anti-wedge. It's the classical element of design. We are serene. We are self-confident. We don't have to go like this. We go like this. And this is the parabolic line, the tension line, which has this incredible tension from the very front to the very rear, and you will find it in all our cars. So that's one of the first elements. Then we have the grille, with the quad lights, but most important thing is the proportions of the car. We have probably one of the best architectures, and when I work with my designers, it's always the same thing, is that I always tell them, don't start with the makeup before we get the right proportions. Every work on the wrong proportion is actually time wasted. So we fight a lot to get the right proportions, and only when we have them, we start basically orchestrating the lines and the volumes and the design elements. And to go back to we have basically a few design elements. Is the parabolic line, the quad lights, the crest grille. We have obviously, the quad lights originated the two lines that we, as a designer, tend to use to simplify everything, because we sketch fast, and then suddenly the lines were all over the paper, and we said, well, yeah, let's have the design orchestrated by two lines. So only those little design elements, because it's like a good recipe. The best ingredients, you need a few ones, and you need the perfect orchestration. That's it, and you can have a perfect dish. This is what we want to achieve with Genesis.
Most people tend to associate design with the aesthetics, but in reality, it's more far-reaching than that, isn't it? I mean, there's a lot more to design. It touches all five senses, really. Yeah. It's especially now, it's very much an experience of the product. So, tell me a little bit about the luxury experience of the Genesis brand.
Two words that I didn't use yet is about athletic elegance, but I think we will talk a bit later about that. But it's when I was mentioning before about the experiences you get when you live in Korea, it's trying to get this into the cars, and as we are facing a change of environment, changing the cars we will drive, and as it has been communicated, we will have by 2030 a lineup of 8 EV vehicles, reaching carbon neutrality in 2035. But the most important thing is, this is giving us the right stage to implement new elements which will enhance the experience we have with the cars. And that is, for instance, I was not aware that central heating system coming from the floor had been actually since centuries used in Korea. Simply because in Korea you don't have the shoes in the house. You are close to the floor when you eat, when you sleep, when you're on the tatami. So basically, it was logical to have the heating coming from the floor. So what happened is the floor of the house is raised, and you have the fire below that basically creates a mass of hot air that warms up the floor. This exact system, it's called the Korean ondol, and this is what we're going to actually utilize on all, because we don't have to create a fire, we have the batteries. Instead of trying to cool down and to try to utilize energy to cool down, we basically dissipate the energy by using it to heat up the interior. So that's one of the elements. We're also talking about a new experience as the cars are getting more and more silent, which is a sound architecture, completely different. So sound architecture which will utilize the fact that the cars are silent, and also that we have much more space, as a lot of elements are relocating outside of the cabin, like the heating system. So then we have much more space to place the loudspeakers and the sound system in the bed. So we approach every single sense in order to design not only a great looking car, but a car that will make you feel at ease, comfortable in the car.
And of course, then there's also the subscription service and
absolutely
concierge
and the fact that, yeah, exactly, that we don't expect the customer to come to us. Again, in the typical Korean tradition, when you go to do shopping in Korea, I was surprised that you don't take the bags, but they get delivered, and by the time you get home, they're already waiting for you. And this is something that we're not used here. And again, it serves the same thing. We don't expect the customer to have to move itself to get his car serviced or repaired.
So I was going to ask you about athletic elegance, and you did kind of touch upon that. It's audacious, distinctly Korean, and innovative.
Yeah.
But how specifically do these keywords manifest themselves in the design of these vehicles? And you did talk a little bit about the lights and the graphical treatment of the vehicles. But how can you maybe give us a little bit more detail, both aesthetically and metaphorically, how these design elements and that athletic elegance manifest?
Yes, I mean, I hope I'm not going to be too long. Basically, when we were looking for attributes that would qualify the design, we thought about athletic elegance, because obviously we want the cars to be sporty, to be dynamic, but we want them to, all of them, to be extremely elegant. And as we have on one side of the scala, we have athleticism, and on the other one we have elegance. It's almost two elements that are almost contradictory, a bit almost Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and the right combination is the one that actually brings attention into the product. So as you go down the line with like the GV60, the GV70, the G70, and you go all the way to G80, GV80, G90. Obviously, you go from cars that are much more extroverted, much more, let's say, dynamic, sexier, and then as we go up, they get more status, they get more presence, they get more elegance rather than pure sportiness. And again, we mentioned also this is one of the reasons why, as I touched before, we're not about wedge. We're about anti-wedge, and this is part of the element. I don't know if I answered well. I'm trying not to go too long.
No, you did. You filled in the holes, but I also want to get into the interior design of the vehicles, because I mean, most of design sells from an initial attraction, but interiors are gaining in importance quite rapidly, even more so in recent years, and as is certain material usage, technology. But the interiors of Genesis products, I mean, particularly in terms of feel, of luxury amenities, of detail, of the quality of every aspect of the interior, is something that is really quite novel in my and I really wanted to discuss that with you. I mean, the interior of Genesis vehicles, what are some of the standout elements, would you say?
Good that you brought me on track. As an exterior designer, I always tend to let you in the back. But basically, we started by trying to get a sense of comfort and not being dominated by the car. Same aspect than for the exterior. So the beauty of emptiness was a beauty of emptiness, beauty of white space. Same two wordings for the same concept. What we did is we were trying to make sure that the interior, which is also always a conjunction from sculpture and functions, it does not get overloaded with buttons. We didn't want an orgy of buttons. We didn't want the self-service buffet. We wanted rather the butler experience. And this is also, again, hinting back at the experience in Korea. In Korea, you go to a restaurant, and most of the time you are in séparés. You are not eating in the main room, but you are eating in separate rooms. And in some cultures, that would be a disaster because you would never see the waiter. That's it. You would get forgotten. And in Korea, it doesn't happen because you have one button and the waiter comes immediately. And this is something you never see anywhere else. It might come, but the same thing we applied on the interiors. You have the butler at disposal when you need him, so that you have an interior which is cleaned up from all the main elements. You will find the two lines as well. Also a point, you create a great architecture, a fantastic room, and then suddenly you really like it. You like the materials, and somebody comes and says, and this is there comes a radiator, and that's it. The room is done. The room is, and what we said, we will not have the radiators. So we integrated the radiators into the layering of the concept. So when you will go upstairs and look at the GV80 and GV70 that we have, plus G80 that we have upstairs, you will notice that the ventilation system again is integrating in the structure of the vehicle. It's a bit like when you have the heating, coming through the slots in the walls and everything. So again, the same thing, integrating the functions into the sculpture rather than creating a great sculpture, really liking it, and then knowing that it's never going to happen like this. The customer will never see it like this. So that was the main important thing, is just making sure that we integrate all those elements from the very beginning in the concept, rather than having fun creating something sexy and then after knowing it's going to be destroyed. So that's part of it. And again, the decluttering of the whole interior, the fact that we have elements like on the two lines present that on the G70, GV70 go all over the instrument cluster. All those elements are important, but the most important thing, the feeling of space, the beauty of white space. You will sit there and you will not be dominated by instruments. It's especially now we are entering in a phase where customers are not ready to be slaves of the machines anymore. We are used to that. The younger generations don't want that. And this is where we have to start shifting to another era and understanding that it's not about the car to define the lives of the customer, but the customer has to feel pleased by the car, the other way around.
That's an excellent segue, because of course sustainability is also a major talking point right now in the automotive industry. Technology plays a huge role. Sustainability, for example, I mean, the way that leather is, that material, for example, is produced is very sustainable at the end of the day. It's just a matter of how it is that it's treated. So in Genesis products, for example, I know that it is very generously treated. I don't know if you want to talk about that specifically.
We can briefly. That's a good point, because we are facing at the moment cultures that still want leather, and cultures that don't want leather anymore. They want, and then the kind of key word is to make everybody's happy is vegan leather, and vegan leather is kind of like a decaffeinated solution, but it's going to change with the introduction of vegetable oils, and so it will be less a synthetic material. It will be a material that will live in the future. This is why I also want to go more and more into the direction of going back to the true luxury. If you go back in the history of the horse carriages, cars didn't have leather inside. The driver, exposed to the elements outside, had leather because he was often getting wet. He had to go. He was getting dirty because he had to repair. He had to do something, intervene with the mechanics. But the people inside were sitting in the most refined textiles and fabrics. And we will go back to this. And this is the right time to basically say goodbye to the leather, not by creating a fake leather, a fake synthetic leather, but just going back to the true sense of luxury, which are the synthetic materials. This said, as we are still using leather, what we notice one thing is if we use leather, we don't want to throw the parts of the leather we're utilizing. So what we're doing it's utilized in this car, but also in the production cars that we are releasing, is woven leather. So what we take is we notice about 40% of the leather gets thrown away, because you have you have your template for the seat, for the dashboard, and then you have all those small bits that you don't need. What we do is we cut those elements in small bands of leather, and we do weave them so that we utilize all the rejects of leather, so we don't throw any leather. So if we have to carry on using leather, we don't want to throw it away. So it's a holistic approach in making sure that all the materials we use, and we are going into paper materials, we're going into vegetable materials, we're going into a lot of materials at the moment, and it's a fascinating time, because I always say, when we do a concept car, I always tell the designers, don't start with the sculpture. I want to start with the materials and let the materials define the shape. And this is something, we're talking about cars designed from the inside out, but that's today. That's nothing new. That's existing. But instead of creating a shape and then covering with 3 different materials, which is absolutely against any concept of sustainability, why don't we utilize the materials that will define the shape of the vehicles? So that's the new part. Let the material live and create.
Excellent. And also technology is playing a huge role as well. I mean, when I was a kid going to auto shows, I would sit down and I would touch the shifter and the steering wheel and what it was like to see out. And now you go to the IAA and everybody's sitting in the cars touching the screen.
Yes.
So technology is really taking over. And that is also a question of design, a question for design. And there's one in particular element that we saw in the initial film that we showed for the Concept X. And that is the story of the crystal sphere. And the crystal sphere, I love this story, and it's something that I'm really fascinated by. So I would love if you could just tell me how this came to be.
Yeah. When we approach the electrification, obviously there's some elements that disappear. Some elements that are basically not anymore playing a big role, like sound, like the vibration of the car when you start the engine. For me, the most important issue was, in the design studio, we have this huge hall. We have probably about 20 design models in one room. It's a huge room. I mean, it's the biggest design studio I've ever had. And we always have some vehicles that are there for the designers to play, to compare, to benchmark. And obviously in the last years, we had a lot of electric vehicles in the room. And I'm extremely stressed, because you imagine this room, this huge room, with a lot of people working. And you have those electric vehicles in there where people come in, play around with the buttons, come out and everything. And I always have this nightmare of somebody pressing on the accelerator and the car basically going into the design studio and hurting people. And I absolutely wanted the designers to work on a solution which would give us a reference when the engine is on and when the engine is off, because you don't have the sound. You can create a light animation or whatever, but that's never the same. So what happened is, and you will probably see in the film, I think we have a little bit later, but what happened is, when the engine is off, you have this crystal magical sphere which is there. But as soon as you press the start button, the sphere turns and unveils the driving commands, which automatically means your engine is on, and you have a immediate reference that the engine is on. That was for me one important. It's also getting a bit of the drama that we had before with the sound, transporting it in a new word, in a non-aggressive new word, and having something which again brings a little bit of life the car is suddenly reacting, and the GV60, which is, we had it on this car, but the GV60 brings it in production already now, and more than that, the GV60 will have a lot of different also interactions with the customer, like the facial recognition, etc., etc. But that is one part which we really enjoy doing it. And I remember the skepticism of a few of our engineers when they were looking at us and say, but you know, it's on the road now.
Exactly. I love that it made it from concept form into a production car, and the production car that it's going to be in is the GV60, and we have a short film on that, which I think we should roll now. Right.
Yeah, it is a small one, but it's actually quite big inside.
So now that we've seen a glimpse of the GV60, it's the first ground-up dedicated all-electric vehicle on the Genesis brand, following, of course, the electrified G80 Saloon that we've seen as well. Tell me, what can you tell me about the unique design traits specifically of the GV60? Can we see the GV60, please?
You will have noticed that no car is the same. We don't do the Russian dolls, we don't do the Matryoshka, we don't do clones. All of our cars have a distinct identity. First of all, because it's boring for designer to carry on repeating things. Second, because I think it's an insult to the customer to give him the same thing in a different proportion. One works, the other ones don't. So when we play with this one, we really wanted something like a little bit of a enfant terrible, something that would be sexy, would be dynamic, and would not make you feel like, oh, it's an electric vehicle. It has less emotions than a combustion engine, and it has a completely different feeling. The fluid shapes actually are orchestrating the fact that the car doesn't have sound, so it is a silent vehicle, and you will find the same design elements: the anti-wedge, the two lines, the quad lights. You will also have what we call the Volt DLO, this kind of graphic line, because again, it's one, when you're sketching, suddenly you can't control your hand and you do some funny things, and then we thought, oh, actually it's not bad, so the GV60 is incorporating a lot of those elements. It is completely integrated into the design philosophy, but again, it's not a reduction of all the other cars. It has its own character, and each of our cars will have his own identity.
And I think you mentioned it's also going to be one of 8 EVs that's coming in the very...
Yeah. That's actually the most important thing, which I didn't say.
Oh, okay. I thought you did. All right.
No, I didn't. Well, I can maybe hint at that. But the fact is that this car is the first, when we started this journey, everybody were obviously automatically knowing by 2016 that we would be doing electric cars. So it was not kind of doing a brand and suddenly say, oh, now we have to change. So from the very beginning, the cars were designed taking into account that we would do electric cars, we will do fuel cell cars, and it is the first car of this lineup of 8 electric vehicles that we will have. I'm not talking about the vehicles that we have electrified, but I'm talking about pure electric vehicles that will be the whole new lineup of Genesis.
Absolutely. So it's definitely an interesting time at Genesis, as you could hear. And on that note, I'd really like to open up the discussion to the audience. If you have anything that you wish to ask Luc, by all means, I think there's a microphone going around somewhere in the back. Just
Yeah.
give us a wave and we'll give it to you.
Look, what
Yes.
you said before and what we have seen so far. Do you believe that design tops technology?
I mean, I'm an engineer that went to the dark side, becoming a designer. So I love technology, and I always like to challenge everybody in the design department and in the engineering department to make sure that we are creating something nice that works. Because I think that to create something beautiful that doesn't have the right technology, that doesn't integrate technology, is wrong. You know, we always talk about form follows function. We all know that that does not work today because every company that would apply form follows function today would go bankrupt because you would not get the right emotion from the customer. But what we tend to like is the form merged with function. So we are talking about almost like a bionic combination of technology and design. You know, there's a lot of things on the GV60. For instance, the clamshell bonnet. The beauty of the car comes because of the clamshell bonnet, because we have one cut line more, so it's one cut line less. So all those elements are participating by bringing technology to make the design nicer. Obviously, we could say today that due to the electrification, there's so many attributes perceived by the customer that will disappear, that styling or design could become more important. Superficially, yes, but actually, if we really want to be honest, we will always love cars which have the right amount of emotion when you look at them and when you utilize them.
Does that go along with the fact, at least in Europe, that the wife decides more and more about buying a new car?
Absolutely. I think it is a really important point because, and I think a lot of men are using that in order to show that, to basically say that, yeah, they're not so much into design, but the you know, into the aesthetical, the kind of like, but the wife has basically decided on that. But actually, they're hiding behind the truth, and I think it's about the sensitivity that we have, and this is why I'm also incredibly happy that the designers we have in Korea are mostly extremely young people and many more women designers that we have in other countries. This is, I think, important because, especially in this phase of change, this macho vroom vroom vehicle is going to be less relevant. Emotion will be there, and we will work hard to bring another type of emotion. But we have to be much more, let's say, intellectually developed than we used to be. And this comes when you have the right mix of people, the right mix of cultures, and the right mix of genders into the design studio.
Can I have one more?
Sure.
You kind of swallowed it, but you mentioned the GV90. Is that right?
G90.
G90. Oh.
But I know you're trying to do. Well, you know, it's a good point. We have the lineup that we will be by the end of this year on the road is a whole lineup that we designed since 2016. So we worked extremely hard to do that, and this is only the first stage. And obviously we are not making specific cars for some regions, although we made a G70 shooting brake for Europe. We will also do cars which will be more addressing to some markets. So I will not exclude that we will have, you know, when you do a G90, the G90 is a car which is quite classical. And there are only two continents where it actually works. It's America and Korea. The future luxury customer will want to have more space have to be less, let's say, clustered into a vehicle. So I think that the future luxury limousine of Genesis will certainly have another typology of vehicle that we have today. So I didn't answer exactly your question, but you can guess from that. So I didn't say no to a GV90 either.
Yeah, we're safe.
Hello.
Hello.
Well, firstly, great story about how the Korean culture has been integrated into the car. I guess my question would be, what was the biggest challenge for you in terms of designing the cars from the traditional internal combustion engine, moving towards the electric vehicles?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll ask a second question as well, if I may.
Oh, wait, maybe. Otherwise, I will have forgotten that. But please go ahead.
And the second question would be, what excites you the most in designing Genesis in the future? What do you look forward the most?
It's interesting because there are two approaches on designing the electric vehicles. One says that the car have to be look completely different, and I tend to agree in some ways, but I also believe that we have an incredible appeal to the golden proportions. And this is why the Genesis X is showing, first of all, one thing, that we will not be mono typology. We don't want a monoculture of typologies of vehicles. And also from the technology point of view, that we will have more than one type of powertrain. Today, it feels like we're going into a bottleneck where we will all be served the same menu. That will not happen. Reason will come back, and emotions as well. So that's one thing. So the powertrain is only a different type of powertrain. We can utilize in some types of vehicles, we can utilize some of the advantages. But for instance, the long bonnet, we could go with all the cars with a cab forward design. Actually, cab forward design is relatively inefficient because you're creating a big dashboard that you can't use. You're bringing a lot of heat into the vehicle behind the glass, and you actually bringing all the elements that you are normally hiding under the bonnet. You're bringing them into the cockpit. When the eGMP platform, which is used on the GV60 and other vehicles in the group, the great advantage is that we didn't try to reduce the bonnet because we took a lot of components and we put them into the bonnet. Like, for instance, the HVAC system, we divided so we would have much more space inside, and we would automatically keep proportions that we love. Now, this said, we will utilize also the fact that we can change the proportion. It's a freedom we have now. Normally, we've been playing always, and we had the first thing you have as a hard point when you design a car is the cowl point. And this, you have to do everything from this cowl point, and this cowl point with a 4-degree vision angle is defining the roof of the height of your roof. So this is gone now. So we can and we will utilize that for some vehicles. On the other hand, we will carry on doing cars like the Genesis X, which are, and this is not just a pure styling exercise. It will be more than that. But we will create cars that will be different in the typology because it would be boring to have millions of cars in the same proportions. We always tend to go from one extreme to the other, but at one point, suddenly diversity comes back into the game. And I think I forgot your second question now. Yeah. Well, the first thing is to be challenged because there's nothing worse than the blue sky. You are never creative if you're on the beach. But if you're in jail, you will be creative to get out of there. And this is where we now are facing so many new elements which are forcing us to get out of the comfort zone. And some people would, we talk about the size of the airbags. We talked about pedestrian protection and all those things that would basically impact bumpers, that would basically completely destroy the aesthetics of a cars. yes, it does if you don't tackle them seriously with creativity. And this is where I really enjoy the slalom we do with engineering. It's kind of like you lose one day, the next day you go back into the office and say, now I will show you. And it's about, if the engineers tell you, great, it's boring. The great thing is the fight, because day after day after day, you learn to work together and to find the right compromise. And as soon as the engineer believes he understands the way you think, you have to change the game. You always have to confuse the enemy, and this is the game, and this is what fascinates me. It's not so much about the great aesthetical sculpture. Yes, in the end, it has to be fantastic. I have to fall in love with it, and I have to be proud of it. But what I love is the fight every day in the design studio. Normally, it's about fight with technical feasibility, economical feasibility, and marketing feasibility. Now I have to have this fight with myself, as I've taken over marketing as well.
It's about pushing the boundaries.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. I hope I could answer well.
All right. Does anyone else have a question? Yes.
Concrete about interior design, color and trim.
Yeah.
You talked about the move from leather to new, more luxurious fabrics. What about decor? What is your vision for wood or replacements for wood and colors? I remember a time when specifically the VW Skoda was green, VW was blue for a while, BMW always had 605 nanometers. Yeah, yeah. Is there a Genesis color inside, or does the customer now expect 128 colors in light?
Well, I always try to, as a designer, to try to find the element which will summarize everything. But colors is a bit specific. I always tend to believe that color is not design, but color is marketing. Because when I dream about a car, I don't dream about the car in colors. I dream about the car in a neutral color because I don't want to be disturbed by the color. So we work extremely, if you look at the Cardiff Green GV80 that we have on the top floor, we worked a lot to get this fantastic green color. But I don't want to reduce to one color. I think if you look at the combination we have of an interior which is using brown and green, or brown and blue, or gray and tan. This is, for me, I actually want there to have the Asian interest, the Asian, let's say, surprising factor, where you open the door and suddenly there's an atmosphere that jumps to you. This is why black and grays and colors and we're living in a world where individuals are trying to get out, especially when they are in the premium luxury brand, of the normal consumption mode. So we don't have, to answer your question simply, we don't and we won't have a single color that will symbolize Genesis. We actually are going from a system where, in the tradition of the, let's say, the Hyundai Motor Group, we were doing cars on BTS, build to system, going from BTS to BTO, build to order, to bespoke. So those are the 3 steps we're doing. So this is actually going away from trying to nail one color to the brand.
All right, I think we have time for one last question before we wrap this up. And the gentleman in the back has been waiting.
As the customer experience gets more and more important in a brand experience of the customer, could you elaborate a little bit more about the service ecosystem that you built around this car? You touched upon it in the beginning of your speech.
About around the whole ecosystem, you mean about the service?
Design special services for the customer that like differentiate the car from another luxury brand?
Well, I do believe that everybody's almost working on this, but we really wanted to make sure that we don't bring the customer into a system where he has to adapt to us, but rather the opposite way. So for having the car, for instance, delivered at home, it meant that we had to deliver the transport infrastructure to bring the cars to the customer. But more specifically, there's a lot of things, for instance, when we talk about the future G90, it's a car that in Korea, it's a chauffeur-driven car. In Europe and in America, it is a car being driven by the owner. But if you go to China, it will also be a chauffeur-driven car. And this is interesting because you have a car which is going to appeal to an average age of 65 years old in America, driving the car, and you will address to 30-year-old customers that will be driven the car in China or in Korea. So it's a complete different game. This is why the car has a dual personality. You have on the front, you have the technology-oriented active cockpit, and in the back you have the cocooning, rewarding aspect. But to go more in detail, when we designed the G90, we knew that the car can only be as good as the driver is, or the chauffeur is. So if we get a car in the hands of any chauffeur, depending on the quality of the chauffeur, the car will be good or bad. This is why we are creating a Genesis Chauffeur Academy. One of the elements. All the other systems are around the touch points that the customer has. For instance, to have one person of reference, one concierge, one GPA that will follow the guy. Because you know the problem is most of the time, whether you buy a car or you join a company, as soon as you have signed your contract with human resources, nobody's there to talk to you anymore. Same thing applies to a car. As soon as you bought the car, good luck to find somebody to help you. We are changing this because your reference point will always be the same. You will have somebody who will be responsive for you and will be always taking care of your needs. And this is a part of the, maybe we can talk a lot, but again, there's a lot of thing. And here Europe is actually utilizing, it's almost like the first one to implement it 100%, this system, because we are starting with a whole network, so we don't have to deal with old, let's say, an old network of dealers. We can basically specify to the whole network, let's say, tailor the whole system around the customer, which is difficult in other countries where you have laws that force you to go through a retail system. But it's utilizing all the lessons learned that we have from Korea. The fact that customers in Korea are extremely demanding for the quality of the vehicle, but also for the quality of the service. Independent of how good the quality of the product is, if the service is bad, they will not buy the vehicle. So this is part of the vehicles, but we will go more into that, and it's all about, you're talking about ecosystem, but for instance, the Genesis Air Mobility will be a system that will allow you to customize your journey from the moment you leave your home to the moment you travel abroad, and you have to go from LAX, landing in LAX and having to go to your office in Irvine, and not having to take a journey of 1.5 hours of traffic on the 405, but rather having a 10-minute journey in an urban air device, which will be taking off and landing vertically. For instance, that will be completing the whole experience. This is one of the elements that we are creating. There are much more. There are many more than we do. And again, there's no limits. And again, it's about the experience of life. We have done a lot of, let's say, experiences together with Michelin star restaurants that are allowing us to extend the journey of the customer to the moment also when he leaves the car. So a lot of more elements, and there are many more to come.
Do Do you have time? Do you have time for one last one?
Let's extend this.
All right.
No, don't worry.
I believe you're going to beat the others by design in the future. What about price-wise?
Well, it's not because I said I was taking care of marketing that you should sell anything.
Yes.
Basically, we have a system on our cars. We don't want to get the customer into a system where he has to tick all the boxes for the car. So it's also part of the customer service we give, that to tailor the vehicle and not having to bother him with so many different options. So we generate, let's say, vehicles with a lot of equipment. I will not talk into numbers because I'm not an expert, especially that again, I'm happy that there is the CEO that takes care of the sales and not me. But you will see that we will be extremely competitive with the prices because we've always been, and we are extremely efficient. So this is something that, especially having the Hyundai Motor Group behind us, so this is allowing us to create a really good, let's say, value offering, considering that the vehicle has all the attributes you need and all the technology you need, but on top of that, you get all the service that will make your life easier. And we've been talking about the fact that 5 years long you have no hassle, whether it's for oil service or whatever, it's all being taken care of. There are many more people in this room from Genesis that will be able to go more in detail with this than me.
Right.
If I think
no. There are some very qualified individuals that can answer your questions, and obviously they're floating around the building, but particularly upstairs, you could take a look at all of the cars on display. So on that note, I would like to thank you all for taking the time to join us this evening. It's been a pleasure to welcome you all. And I really want to thank Luc for also taking the time to be here with us and to answer all of our questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. If you have more specific questions, I mean, obviously there's people that will give you answers for all the aspects of Genesis, but also specific design questions. Eric will basically be synchronizing interviews in the next days or whatever that we can do, whether online or offline. We can do that in the next. I was supposed to fly on Sunday to Korea, but I had to move that. So I will be in Europe more available for eventual additional questions and interviews.
Absolutely. Feel free to contact me. My name is Eric Galina. I'm the Design Communications Manager for Genesis, and I don't think I actually said that in the beginning. So nice to meet you all. So enjoy the evening.
Thank you.
Thank you to Luc. Please feel free to walk around and check out upstairs, especially all of the vehicles that we've been talking about. There's the G80, GV80, or GV80, GV70, and G70 upstairs.
Exactly.
And refreshments will be served later on, but
please will be here, I think.
Have a look around and enjoy the evening.